Okay, so to make something like this work, the first thing we have to do is make our units consistent. Right here, there's one unit that's not consistent. Which is it? The 4 feet. So we're going to change that into inches, which is going to be 48 inches. Now we can find the surface area of this in square inches. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart and recombine some pieces here. First of all, this is 24 inches from here to here, but I'm losing this inch here. But I can just take this piece and put them together and still have 24 by 48. So that's covering this piece here and the top surface of that. So 24 by 48 is going to give me 1,152. That's square inches. Next, I'll do this piece here. It says 6 inches tall, but it's missing this section, right? But I can combine it with this piece, which will give me 6 inches tall by 48 inches long. So I'm use that piece and this front edge. So 6 by 48 is going to give us 288. There we go. 288 square inches. So that takes care of the front sides. Now I have the ends to do here and on the other end. This is 6 inches, 1 inch. Oops, 2 inches on front. Yep. 24 inches and 1 inch here. So I can cut this in a lot of different ways. I'm going to cut it across here. So what we have here is this is 1 by 4, which will be 4 inches, 4 square inches. And this is going to be 2 by 24, which is 48 square inches. So that adds up to a total of 52 square inches. There's 2 of those. So what I have is I have the 1,152 from the top, 288 from the front edges. 52 times 2 is 104 from the ends. I still need to subtract out the circle for the hole, and I have to add in that rim inside there. But let's add this up here. This is 14. 14 again. 5, 1. So I've got 1,544 square inches so far. I have a circle that has a diameter of 16 inches, so a radius of 8. So that's pi times 8 squared, which is going to be 200.96 square inches, correct? I'm going to subtract that. It's going to give me 1343.04 square inches. Am I done yet? No, what do I still need to do? Well, I don't have to do the bottom. Remember, I said we're not doing the bottom or the back. But I do need to do that inner rim. So I need to find that inner rim. That inner rim, if I think of this as just a cylinder, that inner rim is just the outside edge of the cylinder, which if I slice that and unroll it, what I get is a rectangle. The height is still 2 inches. The length is just the circumference of that circle. So that's pi times diameter, pi times 16, which is going to be 50.24 inches. 2 times 50.24 is 100.48 square inches. So that's going to be 1443.52 square inches. Now are we done? Well, that's all of our pieces, but I'm not done yet because asked for it in square feet, didn't it? How do I change 1,443.52 square inches into square feet? Divide by what? 1 square foot is 144 square inches. Since the 144 is on bottom, it's telling me we're going to divide by it. So we're going to get 10.02 square feet. What do you think? Good stuff? Joyful? Okay, so today we're going to start talking about calipers. You guys have all seen calipers. See, in fact, I've got one in here I can pull up and show you quick. Maybe. Actually, no. It got borrowed last year and it didn't come back, so I don't know where it went to. So, we'll have to hunt that down. But anyway, you guys know what a caliper looks like. This picture down here is probably the best picture I can give you, most complete. Oh, here we go. You've got the jaws here. The caliper can be used to measure in several different ways. The standard way is to put something inside the jaws here and measure there. Get the dial reading. Or you can measure the inside of a hole using the reverse jaws up top here. That can be used to measure. Or, I don't have a better picture of the end of one, so I'll just draw it. We'll test my artistic skills here. You've got the slide with the stationary jaw on it, and you've got the moving jaw here. But also, as this jaw moves in and out, there's a piece that moves in and out here. It's a little thin piece of metal that sticks out as you open up the jaws. That can actually be used as a depth gauge. You can set this end on the hole, and that goes down in to get to the bottom of the hole and give you a depth gauge. A lot of people don't realize that that is intentional on your caliper. So we're going to just look at, no matter what part of it you're using, what you're trying to measure with it, it is still used, read in pretty much the same way. So we're going to look at how do you read the caliper. Well, the caliper has two pieces to it. This is just a dial caliper. It has two pieces to it. You have the main scale here, which is on the bars, basically just a ruler. And then you have the dial. Depending on the type of caliper you have, and there are 5 or 6 different types of calipers, dial calipers that you have, it works differently. Now this is a standard or inch caliper. And when you have an inch caliper, almost always the main scale here reads in tenths. So that means there's 2 things you need to get off the main scale. One is the whole inches. This slightly larger number that's raised up a little bit higher is the whole inches. So that's saying that this is 2 whole inches. Now the question is, where do I exactly read this scale? On this particular caliper, I read it at the edge of the jaw here. Whatever that edge covers up, where that edge is at, that's where I read my main scale. Not all of them are like that. If you're not sure, the best thing to do is to close the caliper, put the jaws tight together, and see what part of it lines up with the 0 on that main scale. Because there are some of these, like this one, It's not the edge of the jaw that's going to line up. It's this piece here that's going to show us that it lines up with our main scale. If we were to close these jaws, that piece would line up with 0. So anyway, this one, we are reading it at that edge. And that edge is past the 5. So this would be reading as 2.5. Now then, we read the dial. What number is it saying on the dial? 15. That is in thousandths. So that's 15 thousandths, like that. That lines up so that we can just put it on the end of this. So it's 2.515 inches. So that caliper is reading 2.515 inches. Any questions on what I just did there? So 3 steps. Main scale whole inches, main scale tenths, and then the dial. So this one, how many whole inches? 5. Tenths? 6. It's 5.6. On the dial? 21. So that is 5.621 inches. Here, whole inches? 3 tenths. 6. Dial? 3.666 inches. How about this one? Whole inches? 4. Now this one I did intentionally. We see the 9 there. We can see the 9, but we're not sure if we can see the line. In fact, sometimes we might even see the edge of the line. How do we know whether we're not quite to the 9 or if we're just past the 9? We look at the dial. If the needle were on 0, that would mean we'd be right on the marking on the main scale, right? Well, have we just passed 0 or are we not quite back to 0? We're not quite back to 0, are we? The fact that we're at 0.87 or 0.087 here. We're not quite back to 0, which means we can't quite be to the 9. Does that make sense? So we're at 4.8, and then this is 87 thousandths more. So this one here, again, we see the 3, but are we to the 3? No. So this is how many whole inches? 0.2 tenths. Dial? 71. So 0.271 inches. In your notes, just read this one for me quick. Actually, probably don't need to write it down, but get the reading. Okay, so what is it? 4 tenths. 43. So 4.443. How about this one? Take your time, get the measurement, and then we'll talk about it in about 10 seconds. So what'd you get? 1.142. Okay, this one, as we mentioned, is slightly different. Instead of reading at the edge of the jaw, there's this extra notch back here that this is read at. Everything else works exactly the same. So whole inches, 0 tenths, 5. We're not to the 6 yet. And on the needle, on the gauge, 63. So 0.563 inches. This one, are we to the 8 yet? Yeah, we've passed 0 now, which means we must have just passed a marking on the main scale. So we have passed the 0.8. And what's on the dial? 14. How about this one? What's it say? How many whole inches? 1. How many tenths? 0. And we have to make sure we put that 0 in there. I see a lot of people forget that 0. Because then this is 4/6. That's 1.046. I'll see a lot of people mess up and just put 1.46 there. Be careful about that. Make sure you account for every place value. How about this one? How many whole inches? 1/10. 2. That 61. It's 1.261. This one? Okay, so it's how many whole inches? 1. Is it to the 6 or not? Yes, the dial just passed 0, so it had to just pass a marking on the main scale. So just passed 6. And then 0.9. Remember to put in both digits. A lot of people, again, would just say 1.69. Be careful. This one. 1 point, is it 8 or 9? 8. It's not quite back to 0, so it's not to the 9 yet. 1.8. 96 inches. How about this one? 3.7. Good. Here? That's the same one. Never mind. How about this one? 2.4. 8. 8.6. Yeah, that one got a little small in the. How about this one? 2.8. 36. Try this one on your own. We'll discuss it in about 5 seconds.
Can I ask a question about that first problem you did today?
After a while. So what do we get here? 3.436. This one? 3.6. 5. Now these, I made sure they all lined up pretty evenly on the dial. If they're not exactly on a notch, you go to whichever one the needle is closest to. It's like we discussed before, you never guess in between. It's always to the closest marking. You don't ever guess, so it's about halfway or whatever. We don't do that. This one here, I'm going to have to blow it up a little bit to make it easier to see. But this is the 64th inch caliper. It's kind of a pain to read because of the way it's set up. But what it is, it's for cabinet making. A couple other things where they measure to the 64th of an inch instead of a decimal inch. So I'm going to blow it up here just a little bit so it's easier to see. Oops. Off the main scale, all we are taking is the whole inches. That's 1 whole inch. Over here, then, this gives us our 64ths. Notice it's labeled from 0.64ths all the way up. 15/16ths, of course, would be 60/64ths, and so on. So what we have to do to find this, it's between these two markings. I would say probably closer to this one, wouldn't you say? Slightly. It's really close to being directly in between. But now we got to figure out what that is. So I can either start at the 1/8 and work my way up, or the 3/16 and work my way back. It doesn't matter. Either way, each marking is a 64th. So I got to figure out what that marking is in 64. So if I do the 1/8, 1/8 is how many 64ths? Yeah, times 8, that's 8 64ths. So that'd be 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11 64ths. So this is 1 and 11 64ths of an inch. Does that make sense? So for this one, whole inches, 0, right? None. I know that the half mark is how many 64s? What's half of 64? 32. 33, 34, 35. Which one's it closer to, the 34 or the 35? What, 34? Okay, we can buy the 34. 34 64ths or 17 32nds of an inch. We do still reduce it. Here, whole inches. 1. We'll start at the 5/16 here. How many 64ths is 5/16? Well, 16 times 4, so 5 times 4 is 20. That's 20. 21, 22. It's dead on 22 64ths, which would reduce to 11 32nds. Make sense? This one is 1 7/8 dead on. Not a whole lot of reading to do there, right? Figure this one out. Okay, so what'd you get for whole inches? 2 whole inches. I'd probably do the 5/8 and count backwards. 5/8 is like 40 64ths, so this would be 39 64ths. Maybe get that? Perfect. Now we're going to the metric. In our metric caliper, what we have labeled here, these are centimeters. This is 1, 2, 3 centimeters. Problem is, this here says 0.01 millimeters. There you can see it, 0.01 millimeters. So I have to reconcile that. So what we normally do is we treat this, instead of being 1 centimeter, we treat this as the 10 millimeter line. So this would be how many milliliters? 20 and 30 and so on. So this is 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and so on. So the 3 here is technically the 30 millimeter mark. Am I past the 3 or am I still at 29? We've passed 0, which means we must have just passed a mark. So that is 30 point, what's the needle say? 31. So that's 30.31 millimeters. How about this one? Well, that would be 20. 1, 2, 3. Have we made it to 4? No, because we're not quite back to 0. So this is 23.96 millimeters. So you've got to be careful here. The difficulty here is the difference between the decimal placing here and with the standard. In the standard, your main scale gave you 1 decimal place. And your dial was the second and third, the hundredths and thousandths. Here, the main scale is giving you whole millimeters, and you only have 2 decimal places, and they're both coming off the dial. So this one will be what? 52.41, right? Make sense?
How do we know just looking at it that it's metric?
Good question. First thing that you look for, look on the dial. If the dial is not labeled, then you have to look at how it's divided. Remember that a standard has the 2 numbers scale. You got the big number and the little numbers. The metric will just have a single number scale. But yeah, always the first spot to look is on the dial. It should say millimeters or inches. So here, what's this one? 15, 16, 17 point 77 millimeters. This one, we've passed that line because we just passed 0. A lot of people get confused because this is less than the 1 there, but it's 9. Remember, the 1 is a 10. So this is 9.12 millimeters. This one, 62.48 millimeters. This one, same one, never mind. This one, 86.81. This one, 46.50. And this one, 2.37. This one, we are past that mark because we're past 0. 28.28. And this one, 27.60. Yes. Okay, so what I have here is I have vernier calipers. So I'm going to look at we'll try this one first. This should be a vernier simulator. Oops, that's not good. Don't tell me they pulled them down on me. I've already seen the dial caliper. I want to see the vernier. Well, let's see if it'll. Oops, I don't want to do a vernier in fractional. I want to do a vernier in thousandths. So I'm going to give you a packet to look at for reading calipers. I'll pass that out to you right now, I guess, and then we'll go from there.